my name is Rinda Blom. I'm the author of the Handbook of Gestalt Play Therapy, Practical Guidelines for Child Therapists, and this is how the book is looking. And this is part 2 of a discussion on the theoretical aspects important when we do Gestalt Play Therapy. I have already explained the whole concept of holism and organismic self-regulation and contact making and what figure ground mean in part 1. And now in part 2, I'm going to discuss what is contact boundary disturbances, as well as how does the structure of the personality look like when we do Gestalt Play Therapy. And we're also going to discuss what the goals of Gestalt Play Therapy is. Okay, before we can do that, I want to make a drawing here on the board to show you how the psyche of a child looks. So when a child is born, the child's whole self is unconscious, and that is the basement of the house. And then as the child becomes aware of themselves as a separate part from the mother, in other words, me and my mother is not the same person, and that is around about 3 to 4 years of age, the ego of the child is born, and the other word for the ego is the conscious part of the child. So this is the unconscious part, and that would be more or less all experiences under the age of 2. And specifically bad experiences or traumatic experiences normally is suppressed to the unconscious. Then we have also the roof of the house. The roof is called the persona. And what persona means? Persona is the mask. In other words, the roles that we take on when we are interacting with the environment, with other people. So, and that is not a bad thing, but children learn from as young as 3 years old what the cultural display rules of emotions are in a specific emotion. So semi-automatic at age 3, the child, for example, know that in this culture, when a girl is angry, she has to suppress it. Girls are not allowed to get angry, or boys are not allowed to cry, or maybe when you break something, you're very naughty, or maybe you should not look adults in the eye as a part of respect. So persona would be anything that is a mask, that is not your true self, but that is, you take that on as a way of how do I function in this specific culture to be socially acceptable. And at age 6 years, children, the persona is fully part of them. The cultural display rules is part of how they will react to the outside world. That is also why a child that is younger, for example, 2 years old, will, when they're angry, you know it, and when they're sad, you know it, and when they're scared, you know it, because the persona is not completely developed, which is, in other words, like I said, the mask. But as the child grows older and go to primary school years, they've already learned that they have to hide certain emotions, which is not often not a healthy thing, but that is, they have more defense mechanism to defend themselves and to suppress that emotion. So this is the structure of the psyche of the child, and I'm now going to use this to explain the whole concept of contact boundary disturbances. If we just can go back for a moment to the previous one, we said that the contact boundary is a boundary between the person and the environment. So when we talk about contact boundary disturbances, we literally say it's a disturbance of this contact. So a contact boundary disturbance means the child cannot make contact in a healthy way with the environment because of something that went wrong. So for example, when the child had needs, when the child was young, the child was abused or ignored or neglected. So if I cannot get my needs met in a healthy way, I will adopt unhealthy ways to satisfy my needs. And contact boundary disturbances literally refers to that unhealthy way of need satisfaction. Now, the child that comes in to therapy or to play therapy frequently make use of one or more contact boundary disturbances. So that is part of your assessment, is to see what contact boundary disturbances does the child make use of, because one of our goals is to become aware of the way that we satisfy needs and to move that to a more healthy way. In other words, when you terminate with children, you would have one of your ways of looking if it is a good time to terminate would be to look at that there's no more contact boundary disturbances in terms of the organismic self-regulation. The first contact boundary disturbance that I'm going to discuss is called introjection. So introjection, this is how it's spelled, means I take everything that happens in the environment and I swallow it in whole as if it is true without chewing it. I always use the example of a snake to say that if a snake swallows an egg, the snake will not chew it. Now, the snake will swallow it, and then what would you see in the snake's body is the egg that's sitting there. Now, an introject is swallowing in something that you get as a message from the environment, and you don't have the capacity to assimilate for yourself. Is this healthy or is it not? For example, I've already mentioned some of the examples. You are very naughty when you break something. So the introject will be, I am naughty. And the child doesn't have the capacity to think about that and think, is this true or is it not true? The child just make it their own. So the same with emotions. Now, I'm not allowed to get angry. I'm not allowed to be sad. I'm not allowed to be scared in this family. Everything that happens in this family is my fault, specifically preschoolers that blame themselves for any kind of trauma in their life. The introject will be, I'm selfish, I'm naughty, it's my fault, or maybe even something that I'm not good enough. And in the gestalt play therapy process, we have a very specific phase that deals with the deep-seated introjects in the child's psyche. And what is very important to know is that it's hard to get rid of that. So often as adults, we still struggle with messages that we got as a child that makes no sense, but we still feel guilty if we do something because we swallow that in whole. And we can also think for ourselves that often in adolescence, that will be the time that the child starts becoming critically and not taking everything as it is given anymore. But a young child does not have that capacity, so they will just literally swallow it in whole. Okay, the next one that we're going to discuss is called projection, and I think this is maybe the one that is most well known. So what happens is all the bad stuff that happens in the child's life that the child cannot handle on conscious level because it's too hard is suppressed to the unconscious. Let's say, for example, the child frequently gets a message, you're not good enough, you're actually despicable, you are miserable. And the child doesn't have the ego strength to carry it here. The child will suppress it to the unconscious. In other words, now that message of I'm not good enough. Now, an inferiority complex will be stored in the unconscious. Now, what happens with a projection is that if I don't have the ego strength to feel I feel not good enough. In other words, this is something that needs to get healed in myself. If this message or this complex escape to the conscious level and the child starts feeling I'm not good enough, they have to project it on the environment because it's too painful. So I have to make you feel you are not good enough. You are not okay. Now, let's say like that. So, I think a good example now, a child that feels bad about themselves might become the bully on the school ground that give all the other children or a specific target the message that you're not good enough, you don't do good enough. But actually this comes from the child's own inferiority. So projection literally means I take what's in myself and I put it on the environment. So what I believe about myself, but I'm not strong enough to own that unconscious level, I will project on the environment. What is interesting is that everything that is projected always comes back to the person who projects that. So if today I feel I'm not good enough and therefore I have to criticize someone else on the school ground and make them feel not good enough, tonight that projection will come back to me and I will feel again I'm not good enough. So tomorrow I'll do that again and again and again till in therapy I get strong enough to feel what I need to heal. So I'm not good enough and I need to get healed of that, and then I don't have to project it on others. And obviously in play therapy we also make use of projective techniques to help the child to project what is painful inside in the sandbox or in a drawing or in a clay picture or in a puppet show, so that they can get healed of that. Now, so that is projection. The next one that we're going to discuss, so that was number one. Number two, now the next contact boundary disturbance here is confluence. So confluence, I've already explained, means literally that there is no boundary between myself and the environment. I am the environment. And you will remember that I've previously explained that confluence means will be a child with a very poor self-concept that cannot make their own choices, that they have a poor ego. In other words, they have a poor boundary between themselves and others, and the ego of the child here is the ego strength of the child is very poor, or the ego is very poorly developed. In other words, I still am self-infusion with my mother, that, and normally the mother, because the mother is the mother or the primary caregiver is the first person the child bond with, so that can also be the grandmother, and a father can also carry the mothering. Now, so I'm self-infusion and symbiosis with this person that I don't know what clothes I like, what colors I like, what I like to do best. And I've said previously the reason for that is that the parent has never mirrored to the child that you like this, you don't like that, you're good at this, you're not good at that. So it's literally a child that grows up without the ego that develops from the unconscious, and therefore there's just a poor boundary between yourself and between others. Now, and that is confluence, and you will see that in play therapy when the child cannot struggle to make choices. And then another example would be a child that is very accommodating and a people pleaser. In other words, when I have to make a choice, I think about what will fit others the best, and then I will choose that. All right, let's go to number four. Number four is retroflexion. So retroflexion is exactly the opposite from projection, which literally means I treat myself how I would prefer to treat others. So exactly the opposite. Here I do to others what I want to do to myself, and retroflexion I do to myself what I would like to do to others. Another way to explain that is to say it's acting in, whereas projection is acting out. So retroflexion refers to anything literally that you do to the body. So body symptoms, bedwetting, asthma, ulcers, stomach ache, being nauseous, headaches, depression, all of any body symptom that is a symptom of emotions that is referred back to the body and suppressed in the body rather than expressed, would refer to retroflexion as contact boundary disturbance. And even something like alopecia, where a child's hair fall out, can also be a part of that. And then I think the most common one that we refer to in terms of children is any psychosomatic symptoms. Now, it can sometimes be to the advantage of a child. For example, if it is in a specific situation, maybe I have to suppress the emotion for now because it's not socially against the social norms, but it must not go on forever. Now, okay, the next one that I want to explain is deflection. Deflection is another word for deflection is literally to break contact. Now, I've already explained on the previous drawing what contact making is. Deflection means I reduce my contact or my awareness from the environment. In other words, I kind of withdraw from the environment, and there's two typical ways of deflection that we will see in play therapy. The one is verbally, so that would be a child that say to you, that look at you, maybe you say to the child, today I'm going to read you a story about a mom and dad who got divorced, and you start to read the story, and when you're on the second page, the child stand up and ask, what else are we going to play today? In other words, the child is breaking contact. The child's literally saying, this is too hard, I'm not ready for this, and I don't want to hear this. It comes too close to home. And then the other way in which you can deflect is called is non-verbally, where the child don't say, I don't want to do that, but the child stand up, break eye contact, and move away. And now without contact, we can have no therapy. Now without contact and without a relationship. So if the child is start deflecting either verbally or non-verbally, we will have to stop what we are doing and move to something that's more safe. For example, you were busy with the story about the divorce, or you're busy with the sand scene, and maybe the child has just expressed or built out in the sandbox the extreme conflict that happens in the house as a war. And the child then start breaking contact and ask, what else are we going to do today? Or maybe the child say, I don't want to play this. And what you will do then is move to a safer activity and say, okay, but let's have some balloon tennis, or maybe we can spend the last 5 minutes playing cricket. So you have to move to a more safe activity to restore the contact, and then you can move back to a more threatening thing, maybe not in that session, but for only later, depending on how difficult it is to re-establish contact. All right, the next one, the sixth one, we're almost done with this, is called desensitization. Now, desensitization is quite